Hello, my sewing friends. This is Friday Sews. On Sunday, I'm Jen, and this is the sewing room where I have returned from quite a weekend at the Expo, the Sewing and Quilting Expo in Lakeland, Florida, where I saw so many Friday sewers and I spent time with my sewing sisters, and it was amazing. I have a whole table full of things to show you, but I'm going to do that in another video because it's too much. It's too much. But I did want to talk about sewing this week, and I have some other things to share, so stay tuned. Okay, sewing. I made some things for the Expo, and I want to tell you about them. First of all was New Look 6638. This is a vest. I made the white one. This pattern is from the 1990s. I had that in my stash, so I went over to find something else in my stash. I knew what I was looking for, and then this caught my eye. This is linen. I got this linen at Fabric Mart, and I got it for a specific pattern that I did make. It's a Marcy Tilton dress. And then I made another dress. I color blocked it out, and now I think I have used up all of my linen. It just barely fits. I think I'm going to have to go in and let some seams out. I always think I've got the right size, and I try it on, and it's pretty close, and then I go to wear it, and it's like, whoa, maybe I better let those seams out. Maybe just a tiny bit. But anyway, I really like this. It has a little tie on the back and a little, what's it called? Notch. I don't think it's supposed to be that wide, and I don't think it's supposed to flip out like it does. It's the linen combined with cotton from a hotel sheet that I had, and you can tell I just left the opening and hand stitched it shut, but I think I'm going to go back in and fix that. I didn't do any top stitching, but believe it or not, even though the pattern didn't call for it, I understitched almost the entire thing. So I liked it a lot. I wore it on Saturday, which was, I guess that was yesterday, wasn't it? And it's a little wrinkly because that's what linen does, but I was really happy with that. Of note for me, these buttons and buttonholes, well, the buttons are from my stash, but I never trust my buttonholer on my machine. It's pretty much like everybody else's. You put a little attachment on and then you push a button and it just goes. I never trust it. And this time I thought, you know what? I'm just going to take my hands off and let it go. And you know what? They're perfect. Just goes to show you, Jen, you're a control freak and you need to just let it go. So, maybe that doesn't work every time, but it sure worked consistently for this. And this has 1, 2, 3, 4 buttonholes right in a row. So, lesson learned. So that was my vest. Then I went to make New Look 6673 because I love this. This is currently in the books. You can find it. If you can find New Look patterns, because I don't know what's going on with Joann's, but they don't have a lot of these. I mean, they do carry them, but yeah. Anyway, I made this view. It's view B, and what I was going over there to find when I found the linen was this. This is the remnants of a maxi dress that I made, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago for, what was it called? March Madness Maxi or something like that I did. It was a challenge that I did on Instagram with my 2 friends, Carmen Salome and Sharon from Sharon Sews. We all made a maxi dress out of this, and so I went ahead and got the scraps out, and it worked, and I totally loved it, and I put it on. I fit it as I went, and I like it a lot. I mean, actually, I love this fabric, which is why I'm going to a lot of trouble to get it right. But I put it on, and right across here, it wants to fold down. Now, part of that is because I extended the bodice, as I always do. I did that because my shoulder to apex is longer than usual. So in a dart, I will always drop that. I should have done an adjustment on the princess seam. But when you go to do, it's just, I needed to get it done and I didn't want to fool with it. And I thought, whatever, I'll just deal with it. So I dropped the bodice length and then I just went with the princess seam. And because I dropped it, this curve here caused that top, that extra, to kind of want to fold over. Now, I took this with me and I said, you guys help me. And I put it on and I said, tell me what's wrong here. And Madi from Madi Sews said, I think that your bodice is just a little too long and that's what's causing it to bunch up right here. So I had made it, serged it, took it apart, did it again, didn't like it. So I took it out, I undid it all, and then I basted it. So this is only basted. When I went in the second time to do it, I thought, well, maybe it's maybe the princess seams are, you know, it's too tight. Maybe it's just too small. So I took less seam allowance. I just made it smaller and did that, and it still didn't work. So I'm not willing to give up on this because this fabric is a rayon poplin and it is gorgeous. Well, you can see it's just gorgeous. So I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to get this thing to fit because I just really like it. And if I can get it to fit, I'm going to make this probably again. I don't know when because I don't often make tops, but ironically I made tops this time. And this was green. So yeah, that didn't work. So I couldn't really wear that, but instead I made New Look 6620 and I made, let's see, View B. I was debating on View C, but I got View B done except for the sleeves, and I put one sleeve on, I left the other one off, and I walked around to ask my daughter and my husband, and I said, what do you think? Sleeve or no sleeve? And they both said sleeves. So again, scraps from, what did I call that dress? I think, no, it wasn't the blue Hawaiian. It was the swirly dress that a lot of you liked. I had color blocked it out. It was, I think, a McCall's pattern because I thought initially it was Vogue, but I think it turned out to be McCall's. So I went ahead and used this. Now you can't really see how it wraps around in the back, but I'll show you on the dress form. But huge hit, huge hit. Love this top. Now, if I was gonna make this again, which I might, because I really liked it that much, what I would make it from is probably an interlock knit or a knit like a French terry or something with some body to it, because this is just cotton. Yeah, it works, but it's not as comfortable as I think it would be if I had made it from a knit. So yeah, stable knit, definitely a win. That's what I wore for St. Patrick's Day. So I was wearing green. Kind of makes it look like water, doesn't it? Yeah, I like that a lot. So that was what I made and what I wore. Next up, I want to share with you something I have to do before I leave. Again, I am off again on Tuesday. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law, she flew away home. She flew away, and we had been waiting for this to happen. She was 96, and just, you know, she was kind of done with this world. You know, she was at the point where she was just like, this old body's falling apart, and I don't want to do this anymore. And we knew that, and we wanted her to be able to fly away home, be with Jesus, be with her husband, who my father-in-law passed on in, I think it was 2003. So she'd been without him for a while. She was in assisted living, and yeah, then she flew away. I'll fly away. Oh, glory, I'll fly away. On Saturday. Gosh, that was yesterday. I am all out of whack because my whole weekend was, it all kind of smushed together. And so anyway, so I'm leaving on Tuesday to go up for her memorial service in Ohio, and then again another memorial service in Indiana where she will be laid to rest by right beside her wonderful husband. So I have to do this before I leave because my number 4 daughter, her birthday is the 29th of March, whenever that is. I think it's the week after this one coming up. And she asked for something specific. She wants an apron. She wanted it rainbow with cats somehow involved because she's a huge cat lover. And she's also going to be the nanny for my my grandson, which we are all over the moon about that. So I did not realize I was going to be gone all this coming week, so I don't have time to sew. And I'm going directly from up there to Virginia, which is where she will be for her birthday. And it will be, again, all of her sisters. So it's kind of like big family thing and then another big family thing, except for my husband. So anyway, so I have to make her this apron. And so when I was gone over the weekend, of course, we all had to go to Joann's because of course you do. I found this, which is wonderful rainbow fabric with some dots. And what I'm going to do is take one of these 2 patterns. I'm not sure which. I think I may take the top of this one and combine it with this one. Because I like the top of this one, the way it kind of goes down into almost like a V neckline. It's not really a sweetheart, but it's a V, and then it's got the straps that come that way. There is the line drawings. What have I written? Oh, notes about what size to make a child's apron. You know what? This thing is so old. It's all taped together. I've had it for forever. It's from 2007. But I've made it, actually I have a sew along for this. It's very early on in my YouTube journey. And so anyway, I think I may use the top of that. And then because Jenna has such a great figure, I think I'm going to combine it with this so that I have that little waistline thing, that waistband thing, and then the gathered skirt. And she said she wanted a little pocket where she could stash a phone and have it be something where she could just whip it out and take video of that little boy. So I have this, and then what I'm going to do is, I think just satin stitch this at the top, which is, see, if I use this, then I can go with the ears over towards where the straps attach. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So we will have a little rainbow cat thing with a pocket. So I got to get that done before I leave. So I have tomorrow because I'm not leaving until Tuesday morning. So I can sew tomorrow and today later, and I can pack tomorrow night and scream out of here. So let's get to the comments. 2 weeks ago, the question was scissors or a rotary cutter. So Janie Giordano said, remember electric scissors? Maybe you were too young. I wish. Had a pair in high school, 1966, from Sears. They were pink. Worked good at first, then they wouldn't cut at all. She uses scissors to cut out her pattern. Well, Janie, guess what? No kidding. And you know what? They cut like butter. They really do. They have a little light. Can you see that? And I think these were probably my mother's because I don't have the cap, and that would have been standard for my house of 4 kids and, you know, my mom running around like a chicken with her head cut off. And these were my grandmother's, I think. Now, these look new, honestly. The cord doesn't, but these do. And I've tried them both out. They both work. They really do cut really nicely, but they're kind of unwieldy, I think, or unwieldy. Hard to control. And I think that might be why my mom and my grandma didn't use them very much. So I feel the same way, and that's probably why they're still sharp. I don't know. I think maybe this has a couple of speeds. It says high and low, so maybe I'll try them and just see how far I get. Nancy Helpenstill says, love your bag. Last week, I showed you my pool bag, and I talked about how the straps, I didn't interface them, and they're made from ripstop nylon, which I wasn't sure would go well with interfacing anyway because it's fusible interfacing. I have non-fusible, but anyway. She says, don't take your handles off. Just stitch webbing on top of your existing handles. I never would have thought of that. I would have been ripping out and taking apart and all that. And she had such a great suggestion. So I went and I bought some ribbing at Joann's. Used a coupon, believe it or not. It wasn't on sale, so yay. And yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Elaine Marie So says, hi, Jen. On the scissors versus rotary cutter topic, I use both, but I have a question. When I'm using my rotary cutter, I'm able to use either hand, but primarily she is left-handed. But when using regular scissors, I usually use right-handed scissors, although I can use left-handed scissors. Is everyone, meaning everybody like her who is left-handed, are you like her regarding rotary cutters? So are you ambidextrous? I cannot imagine what it would be like to be left-handed and feel comfortable using a rotary cutter and then have to switch to right-handed scissors, because we all know those are the common ones. So yeah, let her know in comments. Are you like that? And how do you deal with it? She also says, also, I cut the notches outward like you do. Okay, that was last week's question. Do you cut your notches out or do you snip? And so are you a snippet? One of you said that. I thought it was so cute. So are you a snipper or are you a notcher? Well, oh my goodness. It was about even. The snippers very slightly edged out the notchers, but there was another category. So the notchers were 32 of you mentioned it. As for snippers, there were 33 of you who do that. And then the other category was people who mark. So let me tell you what you all said. Kathy McConville, great pull bag. I'm going back to notches. Oh my. Because I often lose my snips or I cut through only one layer in an effort not to snip too deeply. Okay, so she's a reformed notcher. Kuztu says, having originally been taught to cut around the notches in home ec in 9th grade, it was a shock when I learned you could snip into a seam allowance instead. I felt rather scandalous trying it, only to realize that I couldn't see the snips as easily. So I'll stick with my old 1960s method. Yeah, good call. Notchers. Okay, the advantage here is that it does preserve the seam allowance, and I did not think of that. I didn't ever realize that was why, another reason why I was taught to do it that way. But really, anytime you want to let out a seam, if you've snipped, you can't do that because your seam allowance has been snipped. So, okay, so that's the major advantage to notching. Muriel Bailiwick says, I cut out and around my notches. Like you, I can't see the snips. Plus, if anything needs to be let out, you have the full seam allowance to play with. Marcia Kistner said, I used to be a snipper, but I am now reformed. I cut around the notches, which is much safer and easier to see. And again, she's talking about the danger of going beyond the seam allowance, and then you have a problem. Jennifer Cesare, I'm with you. When I learned to sew 1,000 years ago, the notches on the patterns were actually extended to the outside of the pattern, and so I have always cut out and around the notches. Now, funny story, I had a sewing hiatus from sewing for several years, and when I returned to sewing, I discovered that pattern manufacturers no longer print the extended notches, and that completely rocked my world. But I took a deep breath and continued on my way, cutting now around the invisible extended notch. Okay, that is a funny story. I mean, it is. But I also cut around the invisible notch, as it were. Well, the reason I do that is because when I trace it off, I actually extend it out, even though it's not extended out on the actual pattern tissue. But when I trace it on my traced version, I do that. And yeah, they don't do that anymore. A lot of vintage patterns they do, but actually vintage patterns, the lines were thicker and they went to a lot more trouble to print on the tissue. And so they're much more clear. Oddly, they've gone to this, a skinnier line, probably because of multi-sized patterns, but a skinnier line and the notch goes in. So yeah, you have to pay attention. I miss them a lot, I have to tell you. But notches are for matching up seams accurately. So yeah, I think that's what they're for. So that's all of the notchers. Now the snippers, this method is really good if you want to go faster, because it is faster to do this, and it is the industry standard. When they make in the garment industry, they have an actual tool that makes a snip, but yeah, that's the industry standard. So Lauren Letow, I think it's Letow. I'm just getting back to trying garment sewing after mostly doing quilts and crafts, and was surprised to find no notches on the patterns. Now she's talking about the fact that they're not outward, they're inward. So I thought you had to mark them until I saw someone on YouTube doing the snipping. I tried that, and so far so good. But snipping made me kind of nervous. So it just goes to show you how important early education is. We learn these things when young, and it sticks with us for life. I'm assuming she means she learned to cut them out. But yeah, it is confusing because you don't see them unless you're looking for them, because they go in. Linda Vizecki said, I learned to sew as a 4-H'er 1,000 years ago, as I did back in the Stone Age. I always used to cut my notches outward until I purchased a serger. Then I started to mark my woven fabric with chalk and snip my knits. I forgot to go back last week and answer the question about rotary cutter versus scissors. She said, I'm a rotary cutter and use pattern weights instead of pins. I feel I have less chance of distortion, which is true. I don't know. I agree and disagree with that, because I think that's why they build in ease. Some of that is so that if you pin it down, I mean, we're talking about really small amounts of distortion, really small, if you use pins. Anyway, she says, I always use pins instead of clips to hold my pieces together when sewing. So she does use pins. I love your pool bag. Another bag maker you might like is Sara Lawson from Sew Sweetness. So there's another recommendation for a bag maker. The saying we always used growing up in regards to sewing is, there's a right way, a wrong way, and the 4-H way to sew. I heartily agree. Catherine Kahn says, when I was young, I was taught to cut notches outward. They are much easier to see when sewing the garment. I have since switched to snipping, but I snip an inward notch V. I too have difficulty finding the single little snips. Well, what a great idea. And I have seen this when I have gone to make a pattern that has either been thrifted or it's an older pattern where the person who used it cut that V out. And so interesting, isn't it? You don't cut into the seam allowance, but again, you can't let the seam allowance out because you've snipped into the seam allowance. So yeah, interesting, huh? Okay, these people are geniuses. When I read several of these comments, I was amazed, because I thought, why didn't I think of that? That's so smart. Markers. They mark the notch with chalk or a tracing pencil or, fabric marker or friction pen, something like that. The smartest of all, easily done when you mark your dots and your darts. So if you're going through and marking anyway, why not just mark the notches? It really is a duh moment for me. Okay, Sue Knutson says, when mom taught me to sew 1,000 years ago, this is very common. We all learned to sew 1,000 years ago. She taught me to cut out the notches. Now, because of severe arthritis in my thumb, I have to use battery-operated scissors for cutting things out. Then I go back and mark the notches with a fabric marking pen. Maybe that's how I'll do it. That's a good idea. It really is. And if I trace off the pattern, who cares if I cut the notches? So anyway, Sherry Cherry, I love her name. She says, I don't cut around the notches anymore, and I don't snip either. I draw the notches inside the seam allowance with a marker or pen. Yes, ink pens and art markers. Well, it doesn't matter if the mark doesn't go away because it's inside the seam allowance. Unless, again, if you have to let it out. So there's that. Nancy Hurt says, I used to snip outwards on the marks, but lately I find it more convenient to trace a line with my tracing wheel and tracing paper and make it longer than the seam allowance. This way, if I'm serging the seam, I can easily see it. I use tracing method to mark almost everything anymore. I enjoy the process. I do too. I like tracing. Well, you know what? That's so smart, because how many of us own a serger? And you know what? You shear those things right off when you go to finish a seam, or if you're doing the thing on the serger, unless you've cut it out, or, well, I guess you still can see the snips and the notches. But, you know, if you have to go back in and tear something out, and yeah, I always do, it seems like, you can't find the notch anymore. So if you've marked it with some kind of a marker or pen or erasable, whatever, then you'll be able to see them. I think that's really smart. And Brenda Douglas says, I learned about 55 years ago to mark the notches on the outside. I have changed in the past few years to mark with clips. There's a good idea, or markers, depending on the fabric or seam allowance used, or her mood at the time. Again, you know, if you just use a little clip, like one of those little wonder clips, that's a good idea too, because you'll know where it is, won't you? I think I may have to try this marking thing. I think that's really smart. And plus I could use my electric scissors. Talk about making it fast. Okay, this week's question was, what's your favorite shade of green? Because it was St. Patrick's Day. I think mine has got to be like an aqua teal. You know, one of the colors in, where's that top? This. Probably, I don't know that you call that an aqua, but yeah, like maybe that color. Just not mint green, not blue green, but aqua green. I don't know, what is that, yellow green? No, blue green would be yellow green. I don't know. Anyway, just that lighter aqua. I think it looks like water, and I love that. I love that color. I love periwinkle blue, but we're talking about green, so never mind. Yeah, that would be mine. So let me know yours and why. That will do it for Friday Sews on Sunday. As always, if you would like to see a playlist of all of the Friday sews that I have done, check right over here, and I will be back with all of the stuff from the Sewing Expo and maybe a few more things, so stay tuned. And I will leave you with this old hymn because it means a lot to me this week. I'll fly away. Oh, glory, I will fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by. I am gonna fly away.